Standing on the rocks looking at the lake. It's amazing here. When I hear jets flying overhead, I always wondered, where are people going? And then I look around the lake that I live on and I say, I'm glad I don't have to leave anywhere today. I can be here at home. That's when you know you found your place, when you don't dream about leaving it. Hi, welcome back to Black Rattle Life. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dave, and thank you for joining us. If you're returning and you want to find out more about how you can save a lot of money on building a house, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to get notified of upcoming content. In our last video, we talked about the issues we had with having our posts out of alignment. So while we were waiting for that to be rectified, we decided we would start on the floor of the main house portion of the build. This is going to be a huge part of the build, because once you get the floors on, you can actually walk around and see your floor plan actually come to life. You can stand where your rooms are going to be. You can stand in what your kitchen's going to be, pretend you're looking out the window. And that brings everything to life. And once the deck was on, then we could see our view out over the water. And I'm sitting here on my lower deck, where I spend a lot of my mornings looking at sunrises, because this is a beautiful place. It's part of what we really love about being here. It's why we wanted to build a house on this lake. And I guess now's the time to get back to it. We also had to verify that the overhang on the front was correct. It called for a 2-foot cantilever in the plans, and that's all we were allowed based on code, based on the size of our floor joists. We toe nailed the end joists of the beams from the outside using an air framing nailer with 3¼ inch ring shank nails. We already had a compressor and air tools, so we used those to build with. There are also cordless electric versions which work well, especially if you don't have a power source to run the compressor. If I was starting fresh with no tools, I would probably go with the cordless tools, as they add a definite degree of freedom without dragging cords and hoses. But we had quite a few tools already, and the cost to replace good working tools didn't make sense at this point. We did end up purchasing a new compressor shortly after this, but it was still cheaper than starting over with all new tools. We started by placing a floor joist on each end of the beams. Then we double-checked the beams to make sure that we had placed them in the right place and that they were still square. Being amateurs to construction, we found that we all double, triple, and sometimes quadruple checked ourselves just to make sure that we got it right. But it pays to do that, because building materials are expensive, and having to redo something can set your budget back quite a bit. With our end joists in place and squared, we could begin to add the rest of the joists. From our blueprint, we knew that the floor joist could be either 12-inch or 16 inches on center. We opted for the 16-inch for a couple of reasons. The first is that it is industry standard. The second is that it is easier to run plumbing and wiring with a little more room. Thirdly, it allows more space to get tools into the work, like nailing them to the beams. And probably the biggest reason was that in the material quote from the hardware store, they had used 16 inches as their measure, and that is what they delivered. It was Christmas holiday, and we would be looking at a couple of weeks delay to get another delivery. This was an important lesson to us. Count everything as it is delivered, and if there are choices to be made, make sure you clarify which option you are using. For those unfamiliar with carpentry, there are a lot of terms that people will use if you ask for help. The joists around the edge are the rim joists. They are the most important to keep straight, as the walls line up on top of them. On center is the measurement to the center of the joist. It is measured from the outside of the rim joist to the center of the second joist, and from joist center to joist center from there on. It is important that the measurements are accurate, so that both sides of sheet goods like plywood or OSB have a space to be supported and nailed. Now we add the joist, toe nailing at each beam to hold the joists in place. Use nails, not deck screws, as this is a structural application. I used the air nailer. Once all the joists are in place, it is time to add the rim joist to the end of the floor joists. In our jurisdiction, air nailer nails are not approved for this application. We had to use 4-inch galvanized nails to fasten the joists together. The walls sit on these points, and the thicker nails resist shear pressure better. The wrong nails will fail your flooring inspection, and they looked closely at these nails when they came. The next job was to add blocking. These are the short pieces of wood nailed between the joists to add stability. They keep the joists from twisting and make them more resistant to deflection, which is basically bending. This is the bounce that you could feel on floors as you walk or jump on them. As a joist bends, it can twist, which puts the load on the wide side of the board, which is not as strong. Our plans called for blocks over the beam where the joists are cantilevered. With the walls of this section supported only by the joists, a number of different forces act at this point of the beam. Blocking stabilizes those forces. A second set of blocking was needed at the center of the span between the beams. These blocks steady the floor and transfer load to adjacent joists, giving a sturdier structure. To locate the blocks, we mark the center line of the blocking on each of the joists. Then we used a chalk line to mark a straight line all the way across the house. We did this at the center line of the beam at the cantilever and at the center line of the joist span between the beams. We then measured the space between the end rim joists and the second joist. It should ideally be 13 3/4 inches. These need to be accurate, square cuts. They can be done with a circular saw if you are accurate with one. For a beginner, I'd recommend a 10-inch or 12-inch sliding compound miter saw. These make straight or 45-degree cuts more accurately. You're going to be making a lot of cuts. It is a good investment. You won't need a top-of-the-line contractor model unless this becomes your calling and you decide to make a living at it. By the end of the build, you'll love this tool. Once you have the block cut, line one edge along the chalk line and nail through the joist into the block on each end. Now use a string to see if the rim joist is bowed. A short block will bow it inward, a long block will bow it outward. Make sure you have it perfect. If you're not, your walls could curve and the problems keep compounding if you let it go. Next, cut a block of ideally 14.5 inches to go between the next two joists. I say ideally because most 2x material is really 1.5 inches thick. Subtracting the thickness of the board from the 16-inch spacing should give 14.5 inches, but nothing is ever perfect. Cut your block and line an edge along the opposite side of the chalk line. This staggering allows you to nail straight through the joist into the block without toenailing, which is not as strong a joint. The next block is a very important one. The center of the next joist needs to be exactly 48 inches from the outside edge of the rim joist. As you get to the point of sheathing the floor, you'll need this to accurately lay the sheet goods and have a stable joint. This is the time to make a small adjustment to the block length to get the proper centering of this joist. If you just cut all the blocks at once and the length is off by even the thickness of the pencil line, you could be off by 1 inch or more when you get to the other end. It is best to remeasure and recenter every third joist or 4 feet. You can also tack a board across the joist using screws to line them up centered. This keeps them straight and evenly spaced. Continue down the line, alternating from side to side of the line until you have installed all the blocks. Repeat the process for the other row of blocks if necessary. Now that the blocking is done, it's time to add the storm clips. These are metal brackets added to each joist at the points that they connect to the beams. These connections prevent high winds from lifting the house off the beams and anchor the structure to the ground. We used the palm nailer for this. It is an awkward spot to swing a hammer and a small nail. Get a palm nailer, your fingers will thank you. The point of the nail is held lightly in the hole and the storm clip is held in position. When pressure is added to the nail with the nailer, it activates to drive the nail into the wood. It is like a tiny little jackhammer driving nails. For a small home like ours, we drove about 600 nails fastening the storm clips. It takes even more to fasten the trusses, so you will get your value out of this tool. Now you're ready for the truly exciting part, sheathing the floors. We used OSB or oriented strand board. This is a manufactured wood product created by taking chips and glue and rolling them flat using heat and pressure into the desired thickness and cut to the required size. We had 4x8 sheets with a tongue on one long side and a corresponding groove on the other long side. As we had wet snow and a quick freeze the night before we started sheathing, and the joints needed to be clean and dry for the glue, we had a lot of work with a heat gun, melting the ice and drying the wood. A heat gun is like a hairdryer on steroids. much safer than using a torch for heat. To install floor sheathing, you'll need a caulking gun and construction adhesive and a lot of nails. Run a bead of caulking just over 4 feet up each joist and along the rim joist for the first 8 feet of the floor. Take a sheet of OSB and lay it on the joist with the printed side up and the groove along the long edge of the floor perpendicular to the joists. Make sure the edge of the OSB line up with your outside edges of the rim joist in the corner. This will show all your work squaring the floors was not in vain. Now to nail down the sheet of OSB. Put a nail every 6 inches along the rim joists and every 12 inches along the other joists. Repeat along the leading edge with another 6 joists and nail down another full sheet of OSB. We had a 40-foot length, so we used 5 full sheets, and all the time measuring and adjusting made the sheets end up perfectly at the other edge of the rim joist. A small victory. We started the second row with half a sheet of OSB. This staggers the joints and strengthens the floor. You hold the tongue end up a bit off the joist and slide the groove forcefully into the tongue of the starter row. This sets the tongue and groove without damaging them. Pounding with a hammer will break the edges and make it harder to get them together. It also pays to check the grooves before this step to remove any debris or damage. Continuing to the end with full sheets and use the half sheet to finish that row. Alternate rows starting with full or half sheets until the floor is done. Now admire your hard work. We had to wait to do the deck until the helical piles were corrected, and we needed both sections of the flooring done to get our flooring inspection scheduled. So we had to wait, and over Christmas and New Year's, it was going to be a long wait for us, we figured. So we contacted the building office to see if we could start on our walls, start erecting walls on the floor that we had. It was a risky move on our part because if we had done anything wrong with the floors, we could have had to take the walls down and remediate the floors to get it done. We could have set ourselves back even more, but we were fairly confident. We had described what we've done, and we had enough confidence in what we had done to that point that we wouldn't be a problem. Also, the floors where we built on posts were exposed underneath, and they could see every joint that we did. It was going to be available for them to inspect. If you were building on a cement floor, some things may be hidden over the top of thicker walls, and you may not get a good inspection. They may not accept what you did, but for us, we were lucky. We asked very nicely, and they told us to go ahead, but be prepared if things went wrong. We'll cover the wall build in upcoming videos, but today we're going to go with the rest of the flooring and talking about the deck. There were a few things we could do to get started for the deck floor. The deck attaches to the house by a ledger board. This is a board that is fastened to the rim joist with lag bolts. The ledger board is attached to the rim joist first with nails to get it into place. We set it to be about 2 inches below floor level. It was convenient for us that the floors on the main house were 2x10s, and the floors for the deck were 2x8s because of the shortened span. So when we set them level with the bottoms of the rim joist, we ended up with exactly a 2-inch drop in the floors. Hard to see there, but they level up with the joist. You want the rim joist and the deck of the floor to be lower than the interior so that rain and melting snow are less likely to seep in through the doors under the sills. It gives you a little bit of a drop down, and with the holes in the deck boards, you also have a place for the water to drain. You start with a mark on each end and snap a straight line with a chalk line. You'll very rarely find a perfectly straight board, so you will end up forcing the boards to conform to the line. Once you are happy with the ledger board position, you will fasten it to the rim joist with heavy lag bolts or lag screws and washers. They're the same thing, but some people call them one name or the other. I used an impact driver, again a tool that I got more use out of than I anticipated, but well worth the investment. One thing to watch for when placing the lag bolts: do not put them where the joists will go. The head sticking out will get in the way of attaching the joist hangers and joists. That makes a good segue into the joist hangers. The joists for our deck are fastened on both ends with joist hangers. These metal brackets accept the end of the joist and connect them to the ledger board on one end and to the beam on the other end. Joist hangers are fastened to the ledger board with the same little nails that we used with the other clips. They're hard to go. It's a tight spot reaching in the metal hangers, and again, the palm nailer will be your friend because you're going to drive about 600 nails to get these joists in place. While we had the floor joists in place, we also got the rest of the braces that attached to those floor joists. Many of the braces do not actually line up perfectly with the floor joists, so some we had to cut notches in, some we had to put blocks on. These were to fasten and give stability to the house. It's not ideal, and I think it probably needs a couple of extra blocks on the other side to make it as sturdy as possible. I guess that's something I'll have to look at. It still passed its inspection. All of the braces were fastened to the joist with 5-inch structural screws that went through the joist and into the brace itself. All of this cross bracing gave the house stability in many different directions. Then we cut the joists to length and set them in the hangers, nailing them in place. We fastened the last of the post braces to the joists. Cutting notches in the braces to line up with the posts was made easier with an electric chainsaw. It runs slower than a gas saw, and that gave a little better control for carpentry use. Then we decked in the floor on the deck. We used 5/4 by 6 deck boards. We attached these with one screw at every other joist. This was just temporary, as we would need to adjust the boards to even the gaps between the boards. The outside board had to sit level with the outside of the beam. We were building a covered deck, and the posts on the outside had to sit on the beam as it is a load-bearing wall. We ended up with a 1-inch gap between the last two boards. This would be adjusted later. I finally had my happy place. This was where I sat to take breaks and to look out over the lake. Even in winter, it was good for the soul to have a coffee and look out over our view. With the floors installed, we could now walk around and better envision what our layout would look like and what our view would be. Things were finally getting real. This was another milestone for us as well, in that we passed another inspection. Inspections come in stages when you're building a house, and they're predetermined in your building permit, so you know when you have to stop and get that inspection. But for us, it was a huge sigh of relief. We're not professional carpenters. We don't know 100% what we're doing. We went by the blueprints and we asked some questions, and we found that the building officials were very, very helpful in giving us information, because when they were here to do an inspection and we were ready to start the next phase, if we had any questions or things we were unsure of, we asked them what their advice was or what we would have to do to get it past inspection at that stage. And I found them very, very helpful at every step of the way, helping us, because they really want you to be able to do it right the first time. It's more work for them to come back. Nobody likes to tell somebody that you have to tear part of your house down and start over and redo it because you didn't do it right. So if you're unsure, make sure you ask somebody, and we'll try to show you in our videos how we got through it. Again, we're not professional carpenters, and this is documenting our journey as we go through. So thank you for following along, and if you liked what you saw, and if you found it helpful, please subscribe. And if you know somebody else who might, share it with them. We want to do this to help people get into a house affordably. As I've said in other videos, we saved a lot of money, and this is the only way that we would have been able to build our own house and downsize at our age. So thank you very much for sticking around, and continue to enjoy Black Rattle Life.
As I sit here doing my editing, Molly decides she has to come up and help, and she loves bumping my wrists while I'm working on the keypad. So she's not the help she thinks she is, but she's awfully cute while she's doing it. So say hi, Molly.
Hey, say hi.
Don't care if I'm here or I'm gone. The moon pulls waves like it's writing a song. Every rock I stack says I belong. Oh, clouds drift by, they're painters in the blue, showing me what I can do. By the lake, I'm making a home, sticks and trees.